Like, the Mariners really have not done anything well so far this season. Not like there's not one area of their game where you can sit there and say they have done that really well. Offense, nope, not really good. The defense, no, it also really hasn't been good. They're 27th in the league in outs above average so far this season. And their starting pitching, what we sat here on this podcast before the season started and said the starting pitching was supposed to be the best in baseball. They have had a grand total of 3 quality starts in the first 11 games of the season. 3 quality starts, not even elite starts. We're talking a 4.5 ERA over 6 innings, 3 runs in 6 innings, and they have only done that 3 times in 11 games.
So that would be George's first start, Logan's first start, and Bryce's second start, and that's it. Yeah, you want to start with the starting pitching because the area that they're supposed to thrive in through 11 games is not there. Look at some of these rankings. This is entering Monday. So entering Monday's game against the Blue Jays before the series had started, here's where they rank in some categories. They were 23rd in ERA, 23rd, like the best rotation in baseball. Team ERA plus 75. They're 25% below league average as a pitching staff as we currently sit entering this week. And there's other numbers too, like their FIP's low, they're giving up a bunch of home runs, their batting average against is bottom 10 or 11 in the league. Like, this is supposed to be the best unit in baseball. They don't look like it right now.
And I don't have any response. Like, how are you supposed to defend that? Like, what are we supposed to defend that with? The stuff looks fine. I don't know if it's a stuff issue. They're just not getting it done. Like, I don't think George Kirby's stuff deteriorated from the first outing where he looked great to the second outing where he gave up 8 runs. There was no difference, I thought, in stuff. He just wasn't good. Logan Gilbert was okay against Milwaukee in his second start, gave up home runs. Conclusion, as we talked about with Castillo in our last episode, don't give up home runs. And speaking of, Luis Castillo just made his 3rd start, the first Mariner to get to 3 starts here on Monday, and again, didn't perform. He might have gotten a little unlucky, but it's still just didn't execute. The only one where you can say, like, you could have a legitimate, like, you can make points that both starts had quality and, maybe caught a bad break was Bryce, which we'll talk to in the second one. But I'm gonna save Bryce's last his start he made over the weekend against Milwaukee for our second storyline. But I want to talk about his first start, where Bryce essentially. He gave up a home run. That was a 3-run home run he gave up, right, to the Red Sox. But that came right. That was the 3-run home run, right? The Red Sox.
I don't remember if it was 2 or 3.
Regardless, a majority of his runs in that start came on a home run after he got jobbed out of a bad check swing call, where he made the count 2-2, could have gotten out pitch. Instead, they missed a check swing call, went to 3-1, and he gave up a home run on the 3-1 pitch the next pitch. It's a different count, 3-1, 2-2. So you can make like an argument there for Bryce Miller. But otherwise, I mean, man, like Emerson Hancock in his start over the weekend in Milwaukee was not serviceable for number 5 starter, unfortunately. It stinks. I think you and I both really wanted to see Emerson succeed in that 5 spot and at least keep the Mariners in it. And he survived in his first start. His second start, the Brewers just hammered him. It was hard to watch.
So on our live stream on Sunday night, which again, for those of you who don't know, every Sunday night at 7 p.m. now, we go live on both Instagram and YouTube and just take all your guys' questions. So if you guys are ever hanging out on Sunday night, come hang out with us and send us some questions. We talked about Emerson a little bit on Sunday, saying, will we see him go back to Tacoma and then make a corresponding move when his next turn in the rotation occurs? That should be Saturday instead, because it was clear the Mariners needed some bullpen arms. And we thought one of the ways to get a couple arms up here was to send Hancock down. It didn't end up being the case. They called up Tyson Miller, that one we expected. They called up Brett DeGeist, DeJuice, I'm going to get his last name wrong.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't know.
I'm asking the wrong person. TJ botches a lot of names, but
yeah, I'm not great.
So they called up those 2 guys, and Colin Snyder went on the IL. We expected that after he unfortunately got hit in the knee with a comebacker in Milwaukee. And Cody Bolton is currently back in Seattle. Apparently, Scott Service said he's going through some kidney stone stuff. That does not sound fun.
No.
But point being, they do have two new relievers up here in place of Bolton and Snyder. So if Bolton's back on the roster this weekend, then maybe they do send Hancock back to Tacoma and call somebody else up. If they do not have Cody Bolton back by this weekend, Hancock will make his next start.
Oh, Bolton can't be on the roster this weekend. He's on the IL.
Did he officially get placed on the IL?
Yeah, he's on the IL.
Oh, then never mind.
Yeah.
So then yes, Emerson Hancock is making his next outing in Seattle. Yeah. Most likely.
Yeah, most likely they could send him down and bring up Dallas Keuchel, but they need. I don't think Keuchel's on the 40-man, so they'd have to put him on there. Mm-hmm. So that would be the next question. So still up in the air. Dallas Keuchel in his last bit in the majors wasn't great, but it's watching what Emerson Hancock did in Milwaukee. We're just kind of curious if they were to put him back out there again. I don't know if it's really to his benefit to go back out there and really, really struggle again at the big league level when it's clear he's still got some things to work on down in the minor leagues. And if he goes down in Tacoma and works on what he does, and you and I talked about it a little bit on the live stream, there could be a point as we watch him not hold his velocity really again. We saw the velocity continue to dip in his start against Milwaukee, eventually a move to the bullpen. Could be an Emerson's future. I don't know if that's a this year thing, but if he struggles with his velocity and continues to struggle with that could be something we see. So that's something to keep your eye on. Do you have something else before I move on?
Well, I was just going to say that the whole idea here with this number 5 spot is whether they send Hancock back to Tacoma or whether they keep him in the rotation to make his next start. It's all about bridging the gap back to Brian Wu. It's not Emerson Hancock making 30 more starts the rest of the year in Seattle. It's about finding a way to at least hold serve in the games that you're in that number 5 day until Brian Wu is back. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bridge the gap, whether they continue to leave Emerson Hancock out there or they call Dallas Keuchel up because, and the reason TJ talked about Keuchel, we mentioned this in the live stream too, it would be his turn in the rotation. So it lines up. Plus, he threw 5 shutout innings in Tacoma this weekend. So there is some correlation there, but they're trying to bridge the gap back. And until then, until Brian Wu's back, they got to find a solution. But it's not just an Emerson Hancock thing. This is an overarching theme. We've gotten totally away from the rest of the team underperforming, but we're just talking about the pitching stuff first. This is the group you expect to thrive. It's not thriving.
You want to talk about another group that's supposed to thrive? How about the top 5 in the Mariners lineup? Tough subject. Yeah. Because I wrote these numbers down before JP and Cal hit their home runs today on Monday. But entering Monday's game in Toronto, here's the top 5 in your lineup. That's supposed to, these are supposed to be the 5 best hitters in your lineup. JP Crawford had a 29 WRC plus entering Monday. Julio had a 52. Polanco had a 46. Garver had an 85. And Cal had a 43. How are you supposed to score runs like that? Let me give you an answer. You're not going to score runs like that. I'm sorry. Ty France down there in the 7 and 8 hole cannot be the best hitter in the lineup. That cannot happen.
Ty France and Dylan Moore are supposed to be complementary pieces. And if Ty France bounces back to all-star Ty France, great. But to put that expectation on him already isn't fair. You can expect somewhat of a bounce back from Ty France. I think everybody believes he'll be better than he was last year. But to ask for all-star Ty France again, we've got to see it. Until then, if he's doing his job out of the number 7 and 8 spot, great. He's hitting the ball harder right now. That's like, if you look at his Baseball Savant page, his numbers are up, and that's a positive. We saw him get 3 hits on Monday. That's a positive. But for now, he is a bottom 3rd hitter in the order. He's going to hit 6th, 7th, 8th, and do his job there. Him and Dylan Moore are not supposed to be the best hitters on the team. They're supposed to be complementary pieces for now. When every single guy in the first 5 of that lineup is way under 100 with their WRC plus, you're not going to win games. That lines up with the fact their team OPS plus 78. So you're talking about a team ERA plus of 75 on the pitching side and a team OPS plus of 78, which is bottom 5 in baseball. That's not going to win you games.
That's a recipe for 105 losses is what that is. Mm-hmm. That's not going to sustain itself throughout the season, but at its current rate, that's not good. This gives me too much deja vu to what happened last year. This is constantly showing if your best players don't show up, it literally doesn't matter what else happens. Mm-hmm. It does not matter. I'm thinking like this feels exactly like when we're looking at last year and how the lineup was constructed. When Julio, Teo, Gino, and Ty all scuffled at the exact same time, the Mariners weren't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And people were complaining about other things with the lineup and with the pitching staff. It's like, no, like the 4 best hitters in your lineup are not performing, and it's killing the team. And that ended up hurting them all season long, right? And this feels like a very similar scenario. The Mariners hope, and some of Monday's results show that this hopefully is not sustainable with the Mariners hitting the ball hard. Julio hit the ball hard 4 times and had no hits to show for it, hoping eventually those land for hits. But until those guys start producing, and more specifically, number 44 starts producing and doing some damage to the baseball, it's going to hard to just say, yeah, these guys have turned it around.
There's going to be people out there that complain about they didn't do enough in the offseason. They should have done this. They should have done that. We can always have that conversation. But I've got news for people. If your answer right now is, well, they should have signed Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman at time of recording is hitting 186 with a 627 OPS for the Giants. And even if Matt Chapman was here and going off, they still wouldn't be winning. Because guess what? When the other 5 guys in the lineup are doing what they're doing right now, you're still not going to win games. Everything they have done this offseason, like, is totally negated aside from the Polanco edition. Well, the Garver edition too. Those guys are supposed to be the meat of the order. If your best players don't hit, you're not going to win games. So sure, you want to complain about third base. You want to complain about other things. You want to complain about some contracts they dumped. You can do that, but it doesn't change the fact that if Julio's not hitting, if JP's not hitting, if Cal's not hitting, and the 2 new additions in Polanco and Garver aren't hitting, you can't win.
No, you can't. Let's get to the last little bit here before we actually talk about something positive.
Yeah.
There are positive things that happened this week, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah, there are. Can I actually just throw one last thing in before we get to the defense? While we're talking about third base, I do want to at least mention the fact that Josh Rojas is hitting really well through the first 11 games. And Luis Urias, batting average is not high, but through a very short sample so far, OPS is 770. So the offensive production at third base is not what's holding this team back right now. Not at all. It's been one of the better spots when you look at the offensive production at certain positions. The defense we can get to in a minute. But I just wanted to say that. The offensive production at third base, it's not the issue.
The defensive production at third base, a different story. So the Mariners right now are 27th in baseball and outs above average, -6. I was kind of curious, went year by year, and I took a look at the bottom teams in outs above average and saw if they made the playoffs. Bottom 8 teams all missed the playoffs last year and outs above average. The 2023 playoff field, bottom 8 teams missed. 2022, 13 of the 14 bottom teams missed. Funny enough, that one team who was in that the bottom 14 of that list was the Philadelphia Phillies, who made it to the World Series somehow. Then you have 2021. Like, this is where it gets kind of wonky. Like, the 30th rated Red Sox in outs above average made it, and they made it all the way to the ALCS, just as well as the 24th rated Yankees, 23rd Dodgers, 22nd Brewers. It's not a perfect formula. Here's the best example of this. I had to look at 2019 too. The 2 best teams in the American League were 1st and 30th in outs above average in 2019. The Astros and Yankees, 1st and 30th. Not a perfect formula, but the last 2 years, I think, articulate it pretty well that if you don't play very good defense, man, it is really hard to make it to the promised land at the end of the season. And you could look at the other reasons on those teams of why they actually ended up making it, but the defense certainly does not help those teams. And the quest for the Mariners for the rest of the season on defense is to try and be average. Just try. Got to somehow creep up to higher than 20th of outs above average. Just try and just be an average defensive team, because it's kind of difficult to overcome otherwise.
Did Gino and Kelenic make that much of a difference defensively? Because I was even thinking about how much different is the defensive alignment from last year to this year. Third base is different. Left field's different. But right field, Mitch Haniger...
Second's different.
Yeah, but here's my point. Right field, you've got a different guy out there, but Mitch Haniger versus Teoscar Hernandez defensively does not feel very different. At second base, Jorge Polanco versus Colton Wong does not feel all that different. Is it that different? That's what's crazy to me.
Teo was like average outs above OAA last year.
I mean, he was slightly below.
Slightly below. I think Mitch might be a little bit below that, though, that mark that Teo had last year. So
yeah, so that'll make a little bit of a difference.
And then you just and think about it this way. So Rayleigh had his play on Sunday in the outfield. Charges in on a ball, doesn't make the catch. Like, does Kelnick catch that?
Probably.
Right. And that makes a big difference in defensive statistics, making plays like that.
And Luke Rayleigh's at -2 outs above average right now, which is kind of crazy considering, one, he does have speed, and two, that he's barely played. Like, I'm shocked that his defensive metrics say he's been that bad with that little sample size.
It's kind of confusing why he hasn't really played that much.
I said that to you earlier.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what their blueprint here is for Luke Rayleigh, but he's essentially a bench bat right now. He's not getting in the starting lineup very much. He's not pinch hitting all that much. I don't know what the plan here is, because it seemed like they're very adamant about having Dom Canzone hit righties. And you know what? Dom Canzone on Monday here against the Blue Jays had another good day. Looked good at the plate. He had a double late in the game. That's great to see. Where exactly does Rayleigh fit into all this? Mitch Haniger wasn't supposed to be playing this often, at least from what we expected. He was going to be facing lefties and otherwise seeing a lot more time off his feet to preserve his health. It's not happening right now. Instead, Luke Rayleigh's barely playing.
Plans change quickly. As it appears, it can be a vote of confidence combined in Mitch Haniger and Dom Canzone alone, that once you establish that both those guys can face both lefties and righties, then it kind of ends the conversation on Rayleigh, and he does become a bench bat, and he's speed off the bench, and he's a defensive replacement for Haniger if they need it. But they haven't done that.
No.
Really. So
I don't know what the plan there is. Yeah. So this is going to get better because, as we've just outlined, you can't get much worse than this. Your 5 best hitters in the lineup are not going to hit like that all year. Your elite starting rotation is not going to pitch like this all year. Even for those of you now freaking out about 3 Luis Castillo starts, I can almost guarantee it's not going to look like this for much longer. What if TJ and I said, on June 1st, let's assess Luis Castillo? If there's still issues lingering on June 1st, we'll talk about it then. Until then, you have to expect those two groups are going to very much improve. The defense, as we said last week, I don't know. You're just going to have to hope it gets marginally better.